city of Dakar, Senegal shimmered under the coastal sun, its streets alive with the chatter of markets, the scent of grilled fish, and the ever-rolling drums of resistance songs reborn. But behind the glowing facades, something darker brewed. Inside a heavily guarded embassy compound near the Corniche, a secret meeting was underway, one that could determine the fate of Burkina Faso and perhaps all of West Africa. Captain Ibrahim Traoré, the 36-year-old president of Burkina Faso, sat alone in a room with bulletproof glass and imported French furnishings. His military uniform was crisp, his face calm, but his eyes flicked constantly to the large antique clock above the fireplace. He was waiting for a man whose handshake had ended wars, and whose whispers had started others. The door creaked open. Enter Jonathan Grier, a U.S. State Department envoy known more for his covert influence than his public role. He wore a pale blue suit and a forced smile. "You came alone?" Grier asked, pretending it was a question. "I always do when I'm asked to speak privately," Traoré replied. Grier sat across from him, spreading a map on the table between them. It was West Africa, marked in red, blue, and green zones. Grier's fingers landed on Ouagadougou. "The Russians are tightening their grip, Captain," he said, his voice smooth. "Wagner forces in your gold mines. Chinese tech in your schools. Do you think we won't notice?" Ibrahim didn't flinch. "I'm not here to be lectured about choices made in the interest of my people." Grier leaned in. "This isn't just about Burkina anymore. It's about the balance of power. France is restless. NATO is watching. The CIA is. Already in the Sahel," Traoré finished. A flicker of annoyance passed through Grier's mask. "Listen," Grier whispered. "You're young. You're smart. We admire that. But you're playing a dangerous game. Talk to us. Let us help you, before it's too late." Traoré looked at the man for a long time. "You didn't ask me here to offer help." Grier straightened. "What do you mean?" "You asked me here," Traoré said slowly, "to deliver a message from someone who didn't have the courage to face me." Outside the embassy walls, the wind picked up, sending palm leaves trembling. Back at his hotel, Traoré's aide, Captain Adama Ouedraogo, waited anxiously. The moment Traoré entered, he shut the curtains, dimmed the lights, and locked the door. "You were followed," Adama said in a hushed voice. "French operatives from Station Alpha. They're not even hiding it anymore." Traoré took off his cap and placed it on the table. "Then it started." "What started?" Adama asked. Ibrahim sat, his eyes scanning the encrypted tablet in his hand. "The coup. They're planning to overthrow me, within the next 72 hours. Adama's face paled. "Are you sure?" I heard it in Grier's tone. "They're done with me. Too proud. Too independent. Too African." The room fell into a tense silence. Only the muffled sounds of horns from the harbor reminded them they were still free men, for now. Then Ibrahim whispered, as if confirming it to himself, "The West has declared war." Quietly. Like they always do. 3 hours later, a private call. Traoré was on a secure line to President Mamadi Doumbouya of Guinea. "They're coming for you too," he said. Doumbouya grunted. "Let them try. I'm already a dead man walking." "Then let's not walk," Traoré said. "Let's run ahead of them." Meanwhile, in Paris. Inside a cold, wood-paneled room near the Élysée Palace, a dozen men sat around a polished table. Their uniforms bore the insignias of old colonial command. They spoke softly, in clipped French. "Traoré is a threat," one general said. "The Americans have tried soft pressure. It failed." Another diplomat spoke. "Operation Nuit Silencieuse. 48 hours. He'll be out of power or out of breath. Back in Dakar." As night fell over the city, Traoré stood alone on the hotel balcony, looking out over the Atlantic. In his mind, the world map was shifting, alliances changing like shadows under moonlight. He had survived one coup. But this time, it wasn't soldiers in fatigues at his gates. It was something deeper. A silent, calculated betrayal from the highest seats of global power. And somewhere, in a dark office, someone had just signed the document that would attempt to erase him. He lit no light. He made no calls. But in that moment, Captain Ibrahim Traoré made a decision. If they would come in silence, he would speak louder than ever before. He would gather allies not with threats but with truth. And before the 48 hours ended, the world would know everything. At precisely 3:17 a.m., the first encrypted message went out from Traoré's secure channel. It contained only 4 words. Activate Black Echo Protocol. Somewhere in Ouagadougou, in a plain, concrete government building disguised as a water ministry office, a team of 5 elite cyber intelligence operatives received the order. They dropped their snacks. No questions. No greetings. Within 15 minutes, every data stream connected to French, US, and UN surveillance drones in Burkina Faso began flickering. 37 satellites went blind in their airspace. Communications blacked out over half the Sahel corridor. The Americans thought it was a solar flare. It wasn't. In Abidjan, Côte d'Ivoire, a whistleblower named Elodie Mbaye woke to a vibration on her burner phone. She was once a French intelligence analyst, until she stumbled on a secret file that kept her up for nights, Operation Corbeau. It was a joint mission between the CIA, French DGSE, and several unnamed African participants to install a new puppet government in Burkina Faso before the African Union Summit. And now, Ibrahim Traoré had just reached her. She unlocked the phone. I know what you saw. They're moving. You have 9 hours. Help me stop them. Her fingers trembled. She looked at the 2 passports on her table, French and Senegalese, and the empty bag beside them. She'd planned to disappear. But now, she typed one word back. Where? Back in Ouagadougou, Traoré returned home from Dakar under cover of night. He wore civilian clothes, a cap pulled low, and a dark scarf to cover his face. Even the security at the airstrip didn't recognize him. As his convoy rolled quietly through sleeping neighborhoods, Ibrahim looked out the tinted window at the city he loved. This was not the enemy he knew, gunmen in jeeps or rebel fighters in the north. This was a shadow enemy. One that used bankers instead of bullets. Think tanks instead of tanks. They didn't want to kill him in a firefight. They wanted to erase him in a press release. 6:41 a.m., France 24 Newsroom, Paris. A journalist named Delphine Arnaud sat frozen at her desk. In her inbox was an anonymous leak. Thousands of pages of classified files showing covert meetings between French officials and Burkinabe business elites plotting post-Traoré transition frameworks. The documents were damning. Meeting dates. Code names. Even audio transcripts. She'd seen leaks before, but this one chilled her. Because the plan wasn't just about removing Traoré. It involved weaponizing food aid. Blocking vaccine shipments. Collapsing the CFA franc overnight. Total destabilization, Delphine whispered. She turned to her editor. We have to run this. Now. The editor glanced at the file, then at her. We run it, we make history. Or enemies. She stared him down. Both. In the palace war room, 7:03 a.m. Captain Traoré stood before a dimly lit room of trusted ministers and generals. On a screen behind him, a ticking 48-hour countdown. They're coming from within, he began, voice low. Some of them are here in this city. Some wear suits. Some wear our uniforms. He turned to Minister Karim Zongo, head of state security. We need to act without panic. No arrests. No shows. We collect names. We trace money. And we build our answer. What answer? Someone asked. Traoré clicked to the next slide. It showed a map of Africa, with red dots in Kenya, Mali, Guinea, Algeria, and Brussels. I'm calling a summit of resistance, Traoré said. Off the record. In 24 hours. Every African leader who is tired of begging at foreign tables, will come to mine. Meanwhile, inside a French embassy safe room, Ambassador Michel Duret stared at the reports flooding in, digital attacks, media leaks, disrupted drone feeds, and growing calls across African social media under one banner. #Westend with Traoré. The trend had reached 12 million impressions in 6 hours. Protests were forming outside embassies in Bamako, Conakry, and Lomé. Shut this down, Duret barked into his phone. We cannot let this child lead an African insurrection. On the other end of the line, General Martineau of French intelligence responded grimly. It may already be too late. 11:44 a.m., a dusty road in Ouagadougou, Burkina Faso. A battered pickup truck pulled to a stop under the baobab tree where 3 men waited. They were not politicians. Not diplomats. These were war-scarred leaders of local defense groups, militia men who had long resisted both jihadist terror and government betrayal. Traoré stepped out of the truck himself. No guards. No guns. I need you, he told them. Not just to defend our land, but to speak to the world. Why us? One asked. Because the world forgot who built Africa. The farmer. The fighter. The father. You will sit at my summit beside presidents. Their hands met over an old rifle barrel. The alliance was sealed. Back at the palace, 3:13 p.m. Elodie Mbaye arrived, escorted through hidden corridors. She looked exhausted. Her bag was half-zipped, her shirt damp with sweat. Traoré greeted her not as a guest, but as a comrade. She placed a flash drive in his hand. Everything. Their plans. The satellite keys. The names. He nodded once. You've done enough. I haven't, she said, eyes gleaming. Let me speak at the summit. The world needs to see one of their own betray them, for truth. Traoré smiled faintly. Then write your speech. Evening, 7 p.m. As the sun bled over the capital, Traoré stood atop a roof in civilian clothes, gazing out at his people. He saw students marching, holding signs that read, "We are not puppets." He saw vendors sharing bread with journalists. Children painting his image on crumbling walls. And then he saw something else, a drone, high above, red light blinking. He raised a hand, not in fear, but in defiance. Let them watch, he thought. Let them see a man they tried to silence now preparing to speak louder than ever. Tomorrow, the shadow coup would begin. But so would the summit. The battle would not be fought in streets. It would be fought in truth. And Ibrahim Traoré had just started the war. The iron gates of the Ouagadougou State Archives swung open at midnight. Not a single journalist knew. No sirens blared. No official convoys. And yet, inside the ancient stone building, its vaults once used to store colonial files, history was about to be rewritten. A round wooden table stood at the center of the chamber, lit by oil lamps and guarded by elite soldiers handpicked by Captain Ibrahim Traoré himself. They were the only ones he trusted with his life. One by one, the resistance arrived. President Mamadi Doumbouya of Guinea, broad-shouldered and silent, nodded at Ibrahim with the steel gaze of a warrior. From Mali came Assimi Goïta, wrapped in a desert scarf. From Algeria, a diplomatic envoy, disguised as a Red Crescent doctor. Even a secret representative of the Congolese opposition, face-veiled, slipped in through the shadows. And then came the most surprising guest. President William Ruto of Kenya, polished, articulate, a man known more for commerce than confrontation. Traoré met him at the gate. "I thought you wouldn't come," Traoré said. "I almost didn't," Ruto admitted. "Then I realized something. If you fall, we all do." They clasped hands, no more words needed. Inside the chamber, the tension was thick. Maps were spread. Intelligence briefs laid bare. Names of conspirators read out. Traoré stood at the head of the table, his tone composed but burning with quiet rage. "They've stolen from us for generations," he began. "But this time, they want to steal the future." He clicked a remote. A video began to play, Elodie's leak. French generals planning economic sabotage. U.S. operatives naming ministers in West Africa they'd bought. Spreadsheets showing oil contracts already signed, before the governments were even overthrown. Ruto exhaled sharply. "This is colonization by paperwork." "Exactly," Ibrahim said. "They no longer need armies. They use contracts and coups." Mamadi Doumbouya leaned forward. "Then let's give them a different Africa." That's when Traoré unveiled his true proposal. Operation Unity Flame. An African alliance independent of the West. Based on 3 pillars. Energy sovereignty, share oil and solar resources among African nations. Digital independence, build a pan-African encrypted network safe from foreign surveillance. Mutual Defense Pact, a security alliance that would treat any coup in one state as a threat to all. The room fell silent. Ruto leaned back, skeptical. "If we sign this," he said, "we declare war. Not on paper, but in reality." Traoré didn't blink. "They already did. We're just choosing to respond." Outside, in the night. A man named Colonel Zita, once trusted by Ibrahim, sat in a cafe 2 blocks away, watching the archive building through binoculars. He whispered into a concealed radio. "They're here. The summit is real." On the other end, a cold French voice responded. "Proceed. They must not walk out united." 1:33 a.m., inside the chamber. The debate had reached a crescendo. Goita pounded the table. "We are soldiers. If we fall fighting." Ruto countered, "Soldiers die. Economies survive. Think strategically, not just emotionally." "I didn't invite you here to argue," Traoré said, calm but firm. "I invited you to choose." He laid down a blank parchment. "Sign this, and we build something they can't destroy." One by one, they stepped forward. First Goita. Then Mamadi. Then Ruto, with a slow, determined penstroke. Even the veiled Congolese delegate added their mark. They had no title yet. No flag. But Africa now had a new alliance. Meanwhile, in the shadows, betrayal struck. Colonel Zita slipped into the archive through an underground tunnel, one he'd helped design. 2 mercenaries followed, armed with suppressed weapons. They moved like phantoms toward the chamber. The plan was clear: execute Traoré, create chaos, then blame it on foreign sabotage. Within 6 hours, a pre-chosen, transitional council would take control. But they didn't count on Adama. Captain Adama Ouedraogo, Traoré's most trusted aide, heard a footstep that didn't belong. He drew his sidearms silently, crouched behind an old filing cabinet, and waited. The mercenaries rounded the corner, calm, confident. The first never saw the bullet. The second tried to run but hit the tripwire near the archive's fire escape. A small, silent explosion threw him backward into darkness. Adama stepped over their bodies. Then stopped. Zita stood ahead, trembling, his hands up. "I didn't come to kill him," Zita lied. "I only wanted to warn you." "Liar," Adama said. "You wanted to be president." Zita smirked. "I still might be." Back in the chamber, a hush fell. Traoré sensed something had shifted. The door creaked open. Adama stepped in, face pale, a pistol in one hand. "It's done," he said. "The snake has been cut." Traoré nodded once, no fear, no anger, only sadness. "I trusted him once," he whispered. "And now?" Ruto asked. Traoré turned to him. "Now I trust you all." Just before dawn. As the leaders left in disguised vehicles, their minds burned with the knowledge that the world would never see Africa the same way again. The Resistance Summit would remain secret, for now. But the signatures on that parchment were real. So were the enemies now watching. And somewhere in the skies over Gao, a drone's camera zoomed in on the last departing car. Inside it sat Traoré, eyes closed, breathing slow. Preparing. Because tomorrow, the truth would go public. And no power on earth could stop it. The morning of June 24th, the sky above Ouagadougou was painted in quiet gray. But inside a steel broadcast bunker, 40 feet underground, Captain Ibrahim Traoré stood alone before a black microphone, hands steady, breath measured. Across the continent, millions waited. The world didn't know where he was. They only knew this. At 9 a.m. Greenwich Mean Time, Captain Traoré would deliver the most anticipated speech in modern African history. 8:31 a.m. Washington, D.C. In a CIA monitoring station, panic had begun. "Why can't we cut the stream?" shouted a supervisor. A technician's hands flew across his keyboard. "It's bouncing across independent nodes. Nigerian, Egyptian, Congolese, even encrypted satellites over Latin America. Shut it down. We can't. This thing's not just a live stream. It's a message wrapped in 1,000 mirrors." 8:42 a.m., Paris. President Emmanuel Macron watched from the Élysée Palace. His security chief leaned in, whispering updates in French. "This is dangerous. If he exposes Operation Corbeau on air, Macron cut him off. Have DGSE run deep counterops. Deny, spin, discredit, whatever it takes." But in his gut, Macron knew. This wasn't just a Burkinabe broadcast. It was an uprising dressed as a speech. 8:59 a.m. Ouagadougou. A final click. The red recording light blinked. Adama gave a nod from behind the glass. And the captain began. "To the nations of Africa, and to every child born under our sun." His voice, rich with clarity, carried across fiber cables and radio waves. Into dorm rooms in Accra. Into cafes in Nairobi. Into desert radios in Timbuktu. "I speak to you not as a president, but as a son of this continent. And I say to you, we are at war. Not with bombs. But with chains of the invisible. A beat. No music. Just his breath and the silence of millions listening. For 60 years, we were told we were free. Yet our banks still bow to Europe. Our food comes with foreign strings. Our leaders wear suits sewn in Paris, speak scripts written in Washington." His eyes lifted, steady. "They said independence was a flag. I say independence is a fight." In Bamako, men rose from their cafe seats. In Nairobi, university students stopped mid-step, staring at their phones. In Johannesburg, a grandmother touched the edge of her TV screen and whispered, "Say it, child. They are scared. That is why they lie. That is why they bribe our own to betray us. But today, I come not with anger. I come with a map." He held up the parchment signed during the summit. "This is the beginning of the Pan-African Shield. A new alliance of free African nations, bound not by empire, but by dignity. Energy shared. Borders respected. Defense unified. And most importantly, our future, decided by us alone." A pause. Let the world call it dangerous. Let them call it radical. But I ask you, my brothers and sisters. What is more radical than being free? 10:11 a.m., the broadcast begins to collapse. At a NATO cyber hub in Brussels, digital operatives deployed a new protocol, Silencer 5, a network freeze on non-allied media. Africa's screens began to flicker. But it was too late. Traoré had already finished. We were born under the weight of other people's names. But we will die carrying our own. And then he said the final line. Let history know, we did not kneel. 12:45 p.m., global reactions ignite. In South Africa, students marched with homemade banners, Pan-African Shield Now. In Ghana, parliament members proposed immediate oil-sharing agreements with Sahel nations. In Côte d'Ivoire, soldiers refused orders from pro-West commanders and requested new elections. And in Paris, headlines exploded. Traoré declares digital independence. The Africa rebellion has begun. But with power came danger. By 3 p.m., intelligence networks confirmed. 2 assassination plots initiated. UN sanctions under discussion. And at least 5 African presidents had been offered $10 million each to denounce Traoré. Some accepted. Some vanished. But one decided to fight back. Meanwhile, deep in Ouagadougou, in a small office behind the main parliament building, a forgotten enemy stared at a blinking monitor. Zida, still alive, still plotting. He had escaped Adama's bullet with a mere graze. Now he was being hidden by foreign operatives, protected, paid, and preparing his move. He watched the speech on a delayed stream and smiled bitterly. He speaks like a prophet, he whispered. But prophets die young. A masked figure across the room handed him a pistol. Zida took it without hesitation. That night, the final decision. In the presidential chamber, Ibrahim sat with a map spread before him, red marks circling dangerous zones. Behind him, Elodie stood quietly, her eyes full of fear. You went too far, she said. They'll come now. You gave them a reason. I didn't give them a reason, he said. I gave our people a voice. A knock at the door. It was Adama. We found the van. Zida escaped again. There's chatter, he may try something before the summit goes public tomorrow. Ibrahim closed his eyes. Then opened them, sharper than before. Then let them come. Outside the palace. A figure watched from the rooftops. Cloaked in black, rifle aimed, earphone crackling with orders in 3 languages. Target confirmed. Traoré had become too powerful. Tonight, they would strike. And yet, even the sniper didn't know. There was someone else watching him. Because in every war of empires, there is always a counter-sniper. And the next shot would echo across the continent. The palace lights were dimmed. Burkina Faso slept in fragile silence, unaware that its fate balanced on a rifle trigger. High above the capital, on the roof of the National Library, a single sniper crawled forward, cold eyes behind a black mask, fingers steady against the steel. He whispered into his earpiece, target in sight. Far away, inside an air-conditioned room in Abidjan, a French commander responded. Do it. Before midnight. Make it clean. But he wasn't the only one watching the palace. A second voice crackled softly in another headset, this one spoken in Fulani. Confirm visual on rooftop. Red scope active. Permission to engage the shooter. From a nearby apartment balcony, a young Burkinabe girl named Seri peered through binoculars, her heart pounding. She wasn't a soldier. She was barely 16. But she was part of the underground, a network of volunteers who now protected Traoré's revolution with only their eyes, ears, and courage. She saw the glint of metal. She saw the scope. She made her choice. She clicked her walkie. Adama, rooftop sniper, Zone C, 12th floor. I see him. Inside the presidential residence, Adama dropped his coffee. He didn't shout. He didn't panic. He grabbed his rifle, his comms, and sprinted into the dark. He didn't even lock the door behind him. Because if he was a second too late, none of it would matter. On the rooftop, the sniper inhaled, held, and just as he pulled the trigger, a bullet shattered his scope. He jerked back, stunned. Blood ran down the side of his face. Another shot came. And this time it hit his shoulder, knocking him to the gravel. Then came the footsteps. Not soldiers. One man. Adama. Breathless, silent, rifle slung casually behind him like a hunter returning from the wild. "You should have stayed in Paris," Adama said softly. The sniper reached for his belt, but Adama kicked him hard across the jaw. The man collapsed, moaning. Adama picked up the shattered scope and crushed it under his boot. He didn't ask who sent him. He already knew. Elsewhere, beneath the parliament, Zita was moving. He had changed his face, shaved his head, added a false scar. He now wore a priest's robe stolen from a dead man in Niger. He carried no weapons. Just one vial of liquid nerve agent, clear, tasteless, deadly within minutes. The plan was simple: gain access to the palace chapel, wait for Traoré's morning prayer, and lace the communion cup. A quiet death. One that could be blamed on God or sickness or stress. No one would suspect poison. Except, as he entered the underground corridor, a candle flickered. And behind it, a voice echoed. "You believe in God, Zita?" He froze. The speaker stepped from the shadows, dressed in white. It was Elodie. She wasn't smiling. She wasn't surprised. She held a gun, but not aimed at him. She didn't need to. "I believe in judgment," she said. "And you just found it." Zita lunged. But Elodie was faster. She didn't shoot. She grabbed his arm, twisted it, and the vial shattered on the stone floor between them. Zita screamed, the chemical burned his skin. He fell, shaking. Elodie stepped back, eyes calm. "I won't kill you," she said. "But I'll make sure you're remembered, for exactly what you are." 3:17 a.m., Presidential Office. Traoré sat alone at his desk. He had heard the shot. He had seen Adama's return, blood on his shoulder. He had listened to Elodie's breathless voice as she delivered the report. 2 attempts. 1 night. And it wasn't over. He opened a folder. Inside were the names of 12 men. Ministers. Generals. Judges. All had sworn loyalty. All had secretly taken foreign money. He circled each name in black ink. Then he took a match. And set the page on fire. 6 a.m., the coup begins. A convoy of unmarked trucks rolled toward the northern gate. Inside, 300 armed men, all dressed in National Guard uniforms. But they weren't. They were foreign-trained mercenaries, carrying forged IDs and encrypted orders. Their mission was brutal. Capture Traoré. Destroy the summit files. Install Colonel Zita by sunset. But as they approached the palace wall, the lights flicked on. Searchlights. Dozens. And behind the gates, not guards. The people. Thousands of them. Mothers. Students. Retired soldiers. Street vendors. Taxi drivers. Armed not with guns, but resolve. Word of the assassination attempts had leaked. And the people of Burkina Faso had answered the call. The mercenaries hesitated. They hadn't trained for this. They were expecting soldiers, not a wall of humanity. One man raised his rifle. Then a fruit vendor threw a rock. Another man lifted a frying pan. Then a taxi driver shouted, "You want our president? Come take him." And they surged forward. The front line broke. Gunfire erupted, but it was unfocused, scattered. And then came the real army, descending from helicopters, flanking from the rear. Traoré's elite unit had waited until the last second to spring the trap. In 10 minutes, it was over. Smoke. Screams. Silence. And surrender. 7:12 a.m., Ibrahim steps out. He stood atop the palace stairs. No microphone. No cameras. Just his voice. He looked at the bloodied invaders. He looked at the people holding each other, trembling with both fear and pride. And then he said, "This was your land before it was their game. And this will be your land after their game ends." The crowd erupted. Tears flowed. Old women collapsed in prayer. Young men fell to their knees. Because in that moment, they realized something terrifying and beautiful. They hadn't just defended a man. They had defended their own destiny. And won. The dust had barely settled over Ouagadougou. Smoke still curled from broken tires on the palace road. Ambulances weaved past singing crowds. And yet, inside the old courthouse, rebuilt hastily into a military tribunal, something colder than war was about to begin. The people had fought to save their future. But now the truth had to face the light. And that truth was uglier than any foreign soldier. In the courthouse hall, a crowd waited in silence. Soldiers stood guard. Children sat on their father's shoulders. Elderly women clutched wooden rosaries. And at the front, beneath the national flag, Captain Ibrahim Traoré stepped forward. His face was hard. Not angry. Not sorrowful. Just carved from iron. "Bring them in." The doors opened. And one by one, the betrayers entered. 12 men. Once powerful. Once praised. Now stripped of medals and rank. Among them, Minister Balibo, who sold military movements to foreign agents. General Tano, who promised border access to French contractors. Judge Lumba, who buried documents in exchange for offshore accounts. All had smiled at Traoré. Sat at his table. Shared bread. And all had chosen silver over soil. A hushed voice from the crowd rose. "Why are they still alive?" Another voice hissed, "Kill them. We saw the bodies. We saw the blood." But Traoré raised his hand. And silence returned like a falling stone. He stepped forward and faced them. The 12. The fallen. "Speak," he said. "Let your shame be known." None did. Except one. Balibo. He stepped out of line, shoulders trembling. His voice cracked like old timber. "I did it," he whispered. "I gave them your travel plans. I took the money. I thought you wouldn't last a year." The room froze. He sank to his knees. "I thought you were just another young soldier with big speeches and no bullets. I was wrong." Tears slid down his face. "I was wrong." Traoré said nothing for a long time. Then he walked to him. Slowly. Deliberately. "You sold our blood for coins. And yet you admit it. That is more than most." He turned to the guards. "Lock him up. No torture. No comfort. Let him sit with what he's done." They dragged Balibo away. And then came the real shock. Traoré pointed to General Tano. "He will not be tried." Gasps. Shouts. A woman in the gallery screamed, "He killed my son." But Traoré held up a letter. A confession. Written 2 days ago. "Tano took money. But 3 weeks ago, he gave me this. A list of coup names. Coordinates. Dates. He broke the chain of betrayal before it snapped. He looked at the trembling general. You still betrayed us. But you also saved lives. Go. Exile. You'll never set foot on this land again. But you will not die on it either. The room boiled with murmurs. Justice, some said. Mercy, others whispered. But one voice didn't speak. Judge Lumba. He just smiled. After the trial, Traoré returned to his office. He didn't celebrate. He didn't rest. He just stood at the window, watching the city breathe. Adama entered. Face bruised. Bandaged hand. He said nothing, just placed a file on the desk. Lumba's offshore account. It was opened by a woman. In Dakar. Traoré flipped the page. A photo. It wasn't just a woman. It was his cousin. The one he had grown up with. The one who had once sold vegetables beside his mother. The one who used to braid his sister's hair under the mango tree. He closed the file. So it wasn't just power that betrayed. It was blood. That night, Traoré walked into the city alone. No guards. No convoy. He walked among the people who didn't recognize him. He saw vendors patching up their stalls. Children sweeping the streets. Old men laughing over tea. And he sat on a bench near the old train station. There, an elderly man looked up at him, half blind. You remind me of my grandson, the man said. Does he live here? Traoré asked. The man shook his head. He died in the first protest. Shot near the square. He believed in that captain, the one who said Africa could rise again. Traoré's throat tightened. The man reached into his coat. Pulled out a small cloth. Inside, a photo of the grandson. And beside him, Traoré himself. From the first rally. Smiling, covered in dust and fire. The old man didn't recognize him now. He just patted Traoré's shoulder. Tell your friends to keep going, he said. Some of us died, but not in vain. And then he walked off into the dark. Later that night, Elodie found him still on the bench. You needed to see them, she said softly. I needed to remember, he replied. He looked up at the stars. How many more will die? Elodie touched his hand. How many more will live because you refuse to bow? They sat together in silence. And in the shadows, the city lit candles, not for mourning, but for meaning. Dawn broke over Ouagadougou with crimson light. But it wasn't a peaceful morning. It was the beginning of the most dangerous diplomatic gathering Africa had seen in decades. 22 African heads of state. 3 Asian economic giants. And 5 men sent quietly from the West, none with flags, all with private jets and fake smiles. They called it a summit on Sahel unity. But the truth was simpler. It was a battle for Africa's soul. Inside the People's Hall, marble walls gleamed with gold trim. Soldiers stood silent, rifles ready. Cameras hovered overhead, broadcasting the event live to millions. And at the center, alone behind a curved wooden desk, stood Captain Ibrahim Traoré. He wore no tie. No medals. Just the green uniform and quiet fire of a man who had survived bullets, betrayal, and near collapse. The room grew quiet. He stepped to the podium. And the world held its breath. My brothers, Traoré began, his voice calm but firm, today is not about applause. It is about decision. For 60 years, they said we were free. But they took our gold, our oil, our airspace. They wrote our laws. They chose our presidents. They gave us flags, and took our futures. He looked directly into the cameras. But not anymore. A low murmur rose. Some clapped. Others shifted uneasily. The Chinese delegate narrowed his eyes. The French consultant scratched his chin. But Traoré continued. Burkina Faso is no longer a colony. Not of France. Not of Washington. Not of Beijing. And if we must stand alone, then so be it. But I do not believe we are alone. His eyes swept the room. Are we? For a long moment, silence. Then, from the right side of the room, a hand rose. Mali's Colonel Doumbouya stood. We are with you. Then Niger. We stand. Then Guinea. Chad. Liberia. Eritrea. Each leader rising like a flame catching dry grass. Cheers burst from the balconies. Reporters scrambled to send headlines. Protesters outside erupted in wild chanting. But the moment was not safe. Because in the shadows, the last betrayal was already in motion. In the back corridor of the People's Hall, Elodie moved fast. She had picked up the signal, an encrypted transmission sent from inside the building to an unknown satellite in low orbit. She traced it to room 11, marked only as tech storage. Inside, she found him. Karim Bonda. The communications officer. Her friend. A man she once danced with at a festival. A man who had held her nephew when he was born. He froze when he saw her. Elodie. She didn't speak. She slammed him into the wall. Who paid you? His lip trembled. I. Who? His voice cracked. They said they'd kill my sister. In Paris. She has a baby. I didn't want to. She stared at him. And for the first time, Elodie, who had seen war, who had disarmed bombs, felt her knees weaken. Because betrayal isn't always greed. Sometimes it's fear. Back in the hall, Traoré was about to present the Unified Sahel Charter, a document that would legally sever 5 nations from French economic control. His hand hovered above the folder. Then, the lights flickered. Then went dark. Gasps. Screams. Then a second later, a red laser dot appeared on his chest. A sniper. Somewhere, hidden, ready to fire. The room froze. But Traoré did not move. Do it, he said aloud. Fire. No one breathed. Even the sniper, unknown, unseen, hesitated. Then the laser vanished. And the lights came back. High on the ceiling platform, the sniper lay still. Because a hand held a knife to his throat. Adama. Covered in grease from crawling through vents. He whispered, next time, don't aim unless you're ready to die. The sniper swallowed. I was told he would run. Adama smiled grimly. You were told wrong. Down below, Traoré opened the folder. Unfolded the Sahel Charter. And signed it. The sound of the pen scratching echoed louder than any bullet. One by one, others followed. Doumbouya. Bazoum. Goita. Isaias. They signed. The world changed with every stroke of ink. And outside, millions chanted one name. Traoré. 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 Later that evening, he stood at the balcony. Below, the crowd stretched beyond sight. Candles in every hand. Flags waving like fire. Elodie joined him, blood on her sleeve. Karim. He's in holding. He cried the whole time. Traoré was quiet. Then he said. We forgive him. Because if we don't, we become the very thing we're fighting. The camera crews caught his face in the golden dusk. Not triumphant. Not arrogant. Just, human. And somehow, that made him immortal. The summit was over. The flags had come down. The cameras were gone. The marble floors were swept, polished, forgotten. But what Traoré had lit inside that room could not be undone. Because by dawn the next morning, 5 West African nations had cut their military ties to France. 7 others had announced reviews of their colonial contracts. And in the streets of Niger, Mali, Guinea, and Burkina Faso, something stronger than policy was rising. Pride. Real, bone-deep, earned pride. But inside Traoré's war room, there was no celebration. He sat alone, staring at the map of Africa on the wall. So many borders drawn by foreigners. So many lines soaked in forgotten blood. He traced his finger across them. Ghana. Chad. Angola. Libya. All stories. All pain. And yet. All possibility. Adama entered quietly. A limp in his left leg now. He hadn't told anyone about the wound from the sniper crawl. He didn't need to. He saw the look in Traoré's eyes. "You're not done, are you?" Traoré didn't answer. He turned from the map and said, "How many nations would fall if we left them alone now?" Adama shrugged. "Most. And how many would rise, if we showed them how?" Adama stepped closer. "Then we don't stop." That evening, a letter arrived. No stamp. No seal. Just a folded note. Elodie opened it. Inside, a single sentence. "If you continue this path, there will be no turning back. M." Adama narrowed his eyes. CIA. Elodie shook her head. Too poetic. Traoré took the letter and burned it in the candle flame. Let them watch. Let them warn. They could not unmake what had already begun. 2 days later, the storm came. Paris froze all Sahel funds. Brussels suspended medical aid. Washington launched sanctions. News anchors talked of instability. European diplomats accused Burkina Faso of military arrogance. They called him reckless. Dangerous. A radical. But the people didn't care. They knew something no camera could show. They had dignity again. And for the first time in half a century, they had hope. But Traoré wasn't celebrating. He was watching the skies. Because he knew, when empires fail, they don't go quietly. It happened at 2:43 a.m., 3 days after the summit. A soft knock on Elodie's door. When she opened it, a boy stood there. No more than 12. Covered in dust. He held a flash drive. "My brother said give this to the captain. He said, they'll kill us." She pulled him inside. Fed him. Let him sleep. Then plugged in the drive. And what she saw made her heart stop. Video footage. Satellite feeds. Contracts. Names. All pointing to the same operation. Project Sparrow. An assassination initiative involving 7 African leaders, backed by private Western military contractors and signed by a handful of corrupted African ministers in exile. Target 1, Ibrahim Traoré. Target 2, Doumbouya. Target 3, the African dream itself. And the date of execution? Tomorrow. Elodie burst into the war room at 4 a.m. Adama had already seen it. Traoré stood silent. Not surprised. Just, calm. "They're not trying to kill me," he said. "They're trying to kill belief." But they forgot one thing. Adama looked up. "What's that?" "A flame does not die because you crush it. It dies when people stop passing it forward." He stepped into the press room at 5 a.m. Still dark outside. No podium. No script. Just his voice. Broadcast on every frequency they could control. "My name is Ibrahim Traoré. And I may die tomorrow. But if I do, let it be known, I did not kneel. I did not sign. I did not obey. I did not sell you. Let them kill one man. They cannot kill us all. And if you light your candle from this fire, then I win. By noon, every home in Burkina Faso had a candle in the window. Every street lamp was draped in black. Every student wore green. The signal was clear. Even if they struck him down, they'd face 1,000,000 more. But the strike never came. Because that night, in Johannesburg, a South African journalist published the full Project Sparrow files. Names. Faces. Pay stubs. The global outrage was immediate. Protests in Paris. Riots in Brussels. Arrests in Nairobi. And within days, the private firm at the center, Braction Global, collapsed. Traoré had survived the bullets before they even fired. Because truth, when it's finally free, is louder than war. On the roof of the palace, Traoré stood alone, watching the horizon. Elodie joined him. "It's over," she said. "No," he replied. "It's just begun." He looked out at his city. And beyond that, his continent. A place of broken bones, but unbroken will. Of kings without crowns. Of pain that became music. Of children who remembered their ancestors not with sorrow, but with fire. And as the wind passed over the city, it whispered something only he could hear. Africa is waking up. And her sons are standing again.